Hi, I'm Catherine.
And I'm Gail, and welcome to Women Over 70 Aging Reimagined, our award winning weekly podcast. Visit womenover70.com to learn about how you may become involved and join Aging Reimagined Circle and enjoy free participation in our online monthly programs. And we thank you for listening. And we want to thank our sponsor, Women's Connection, a nonprofit women's group with chapters around the country. Members are vibrant, accomplished women, age 50 and forward, who connect around common interests, empower each other to thrive, and stick together as they travel through the stuff of life, no matter what comes along. You may find them at womenconnecting.org.
Today, we're delighted to be talking with Dr. Julie Bach. Julie is an advocate for women aging, part of our series, and she declares that gerontology runs in my blood. She spent a year with VISTA in her early 20s, working with older adults, and this experience launched her career path as a practicing gerontologist, as a counselor and a college teacher. Along the way, Julie earned multiple credentials. She has an MSW and PhD in social work and an MS in gerontology. She's particularly passionate about the impact of caregiving on older women and the need for intergenerational connections. She's concerned about our society becoming more, not less, ageist. And Julie's partially retired and teaches part-time at Dominican University in Illinois. Her courses, interesting courses, include advanced social work for older adults, society, health and aging, and global aging. And as an activist, she says her goal is to make this a better world for the elders. So welcome, Julie. We're delighted to have you here as an advocate for women aging. So let's just start in by having you talk about what really drew you to the field of gerontology when, especially at such a young age.
Well, thanks for having me on. I feel very honored. So like a lot of current people, I did not finish I had a bachelor's in social work, and ended up working for the Volunteers in Service to America, VISTA, which is like uh, it's the component of that stays in the US. And they placed me of all places in Las Vegas. So I was in Las Vegas in 1976 and was at an agency, and there were about 5 of us that were all VISTA volunteers, and they said, "Who wants to work in the older adults home care program?" And unbeknownst to me, all my colleagues had stepped back a little bit, and I was still up front, and they go, "Oh, Julie, thank you for volunteering." And so that opened the door for me to start doing home visits to older adults. And I realized that working with older adults was one of the most incredible experiences I had ever had. Like many people, I had some slight conversations with grandparents, but this was the first time I was really meeting a variety of older adults who had stories that were just remarkable to me. And I also realized that I didn't know enough about getting older. So at that time, there were 2 programs in the country that offered a master's in gerontology, and one was at the University of Southern California, which I went to, and that's when I got my MSG. And I deliberately chose not to go directly for my MSW because I knew that social work did not focus enough on older adults, and I was afraid they would try to talk me out of that focus. So I had the most incredible experience in the field of gerontology. And at that point, I was, I think, 22 years old. And everybody in that program was all the students were very focused on working with older adults. So it only intensified my desire to work in the field of gerontology. And I never looked back. I've worked primarily with older adults my whole career, while I went back and eventually got the MSW because you can't be licensed with a master's in gerontology. And then after many, many years, decided I needed to teach social work students about aging and how much they would love it if they worked with older adults rather than children. because that's where they want to go, right? Healthcare providers want to generally work with children because that's what they know, or adults, but not necessarily older adults. So I saw over time that less and less incentives were going into place for students to want to work with older adults instead of going the direction of all these people turning 65, which we knew about in 1977. Instead, there was less assistance, less incentives to get people in PhD programs to go into the field of gerontology or aging. So we've been going in the wrong direction.
So, Julie, I have been hearing that some gerontology programs are being closed, and that it seems to be so counterproductive, given our aging population. What is your take on kind of the status of the
Well, speaking from the state of Illinois, so being in the Chicagoland area, probably 10, 15 years ago, there were many universities that were offering, if not, I mean, the only school in this area that offers a master in gerontology is at Concordia. But there were lots of social work programs, which I'm most familiar with, that had that had a focus in gerontology, that offered classes in different aspects of aging. And little by little, all of those programs have been closing. Some of it has to do with they don't have PhDs. They don't have teachers, professors who focused on aging issues going through their doctoral programs. So it's very difficult to find professors who will teach with that expertise. So that's some of the problem. But it's also true there are less geriatricians than there were 30 years ago, right? So in all of the health professions, there are less people going into the programs. And it really is a sell job. There's usually a small percentage of students who will come into a program and say, I want to work with older adults. But what you've really got to do is, in my experience, is have students interact with older adults who are lively and vital and have stories that are amazing. And then the students begin to think, this is kind of a cool population to work with. And then they will consider it. But you have to deliberately set up experiences with the students in order to help them see that it's a real positive experience, which goes to the intergenerational aspect, right? If young people are not interacting with older adults, or the only older adults they're interacting with are negative or ill, seriously ill, then they think every older adult is that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's very perplexing to me. So I know that as you and I have talked in the past, that you're very interested in the whole area of caregiving and what that I might have just call it a burden that that's usually placed on older women. So what's your perspective on caregiving and your experience with that?
Well, very early in my work with older adults, I started working in the field of Alzheimer's disease and working with caregivers who were caring for someone they loved with that disease. And as we know, it is still primarily women. It has changed a little bit probably in the last 40 years, in that there are some men. The number of men, sons, and husbands has increased, but it still falls primarily to the women. And that's true of any kind of caregiving, right? Not just of Alzheimer's disease. And women take it on because that's what women do. They, heaven forbid you're the daughter in a family of 5 children and there are 4 sons and 1 daughter. It's almost an automatic you're doing it. Or heaven help you if you're the one without children. It's kind of like automatic again. And they'll do daughter-in-laws before they'll do sons. So we know that women and men just think they aren't capable, or they don't know how to do it. And I think that part of my experience with caregivers and women is they also they feel guilty if they ask for help. We've been programmed that we should be able to do it all. For those of us that worked and had families, you did it all, right? Even if it meant you were getting no sleep. And so I think that women, first of all, they're just trained. I think we are nurturers somewhat, maybe because of our biology, but I also think we're just trained to be the nurturers, the carers, and males are not trained that way. And I think that some mothers are now training their sons to be as much a carer as their daughters, but it still generally ends up being the women. And I've seen the stress that women carry with them by perhaps, especially that sandwich generation. You're taking care of your kids and you're taking care of your parents. I do a support group once a month for family members who have someone with memory loss. And there are men in my group. And that's really rare to have men who are coming to a support group. And I think they come because there are other men there. So it's not that men aren't there. It's just that they're not there in the numbers. And I do think that for women, it's really, really difficult to see caregiving as stressful, because caregiving usually starts really, really slow unless someone has had a sudden stroke. But like with Alzheimer's disease, you're just adding things over time. And they really don't realize that their whole being, their whole role now is to be a caregiver.
I know that, there are some organizations, some movement to provide more systemic support for caregivers. Do you know what's going on in that realm?
Well, one of the things that's been going on for a while is that when women leave the workforce, they lose their Social Security buy-in or pay-in, right? So if you leave to raise small children, if you leave to take care of an elder, women are financially in trouble because they don't have as many quarters that they've paid into Social Security. And there's been one movement that we actually give benefits to women or anybody who has left the workforce to be a caregiver, so that they're not getting dinged on how much is going into their Social Security fund. So that's one of the things going on.
Has that happened, or that's in progress?
That is something that people have thrown around. I don't know. The other thing is actually paying people for medical family leave, because it's great that you can get 6 weeks or, X amount of time off for family medical leave. But if you're not getting paid from your job while you're off, how many families can afford to do that? So I think these are policies that women need to be advocating for, so that they have, and again, people don't all look down the road. So a woman in her 50s who leaves her job to take care of her parents doesn't realize that at 67, when she may be retiring, she's not going to have as much income because she just took 3 years off to care for her parents.
Right. Right. I think they look at the last 10 quarters or something like that you've worked, and that time off really affects what they get for Social Security. Yeah, that's an important point. But some societies seem to this issue of who's going to take care of who. It's not always family members. Often people are hired to come in and take care of people who are older people who have Alzheimer's or dementia, or who are failing, who are in hospice, who need caretakers. And it seems that there's more of a male population that can be hired to do that than when, as you said so rightly, daughters or sons are, it's usually the daughter who steps in and really loses a lot in other aspects of her life.
No, I used to say one of your points, Gail, that like other professions, when there's pay involved, men will step in.
Yes, exactly. That's right.
Right. And so, yeah, so they start in that way, they help to elevate the field.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah, that happened in nursing. When they decided that there were not enough men going into nursing, they realized they had to increase the payment for nurses, and then they had a much higher number of males go into nursing than had gone in the past. And that's part of it, is that women in general are willing to work for less, and we've often had to work for less.
Mhm.
So we're not necessarily being as assertive. And caregiving is, as any of the roles that are kind of seen as female roles, they don't get the kind of support that we know they need.
Yeah.
So true. Very true.
The other thing about caregiving that I don't think a lot of people think about is the transition from being a caregiver to not being a caregiver.
Yeah.
That, you're caring for this person for possibly years. You've become fairly isolated because they're your full focus. And I always say that when someone's loved one dies, they're fired from their job, because caregiving is their career. At that point, it has been their career. And any person who, especially for spouses that have been married 50, 60 years, we know the transition is incredibly difficult for many of those people as they grieve and try to figure out their new identity. But add to that the fact that your whole life was consumed by caregiving.
Right.
And I do hear this from both men and women. It doesn't only apply to women, but since women are generally more apt to be the caregivers, you suddenly have this huge void in your life. And I find that there is definitely a group of women who just go on and find a new person to have to caregive for.
Mhm.
I don't know if any of you know it, but so there's that person in the family who first took care of maybe their mom, and then their dad, and then an aunt, and then somebody else. It's like they're just the caregiver in the network.
There's someone like me who just like after a couple of experiences running the other direction.
Yes.
Goodness. You've mentioned the work you do with students, the younger generation of people who you want to help bring into the profession. But say a little bit more about intergenerational connections, why they're important for older women, because we hear a lot about that too. You need to have young.
Well, and I think they're not only important for older women, I think they're important for the younger women.
Mhm.
I don't know that older women realize how incredible being a role model is for younger women. How relieved younger women are to hear that you can be in your 70s and even and your 80s and still be enjoying life. I tell younger women all the time that they're not going to blossom till they're in their 50s. And so they should be looking forward to their 50s and 60s, not dreading them. That's not a message a lot of women, younger women, receive. So I think that older women can feel very proud and needed when they're mentoring younger women. And I also think that younger women can bring information and viewpoints and ways of looking at life. There's the classic always have friends 10 years younger than you, so when you can't drive anymore, they still can. Um, so I do think that both this intergenerational brings an amazing amount of it gives a depth to who we are as older women to be with these younger women. And, there are less grandmas around, there are less children, grandchildren for anybody who likes little children. There are all these young mothers who desperately need a grandmother. And maybe their mom is not around, or maybe she's the type of woman who really doesn't want to take care of kids or have someone over on the weekends who's young. So I think that there's a reciprocal role where if you enjoy being with really young children and guiding new moms or moms of different, I mean, if you've had children, you know what it was like to navigate certain developmental stages of your children, and young people really appreciate someone who's gone through it. And it's different when it's not your family member telling you things. Yeah, I think there's a different kind of connection when you're intergenerational and you're not the family member.
Yeah, good point. Good point. Rings true. Rings true.
And it also, I think the other part of it is it dispels ageism in a way that people aren't thinking about. So someone in their 50s or 30s who knows someone who's in their 70s or 80s that they respect and are in awe of are less apt to buy into ageism.
Yeah, I would agree. It's interesting. I have really developed a close friendship with a woman she's a young woman. She's 51, so I'm 75. So she's my intergenerational connection. And then I am the younger woman to a friend of mine who's 15 years older. So she's in her 90s. And so it's really interesting to think about that in terms of generational connection and differences, what we can offer each other. And it's quite wonderful.
And, just like a lot of the segregation in our country, so we segregate by race, we segregate by a lot of factors. Young people hang out with young people and older people hang out. And the historical perspective that several generations lived in a three flat, or you knew your aunts and uncles well. They weren't just people that you knew of, you actually knew them. The neighbors down the street, because everybody lived in the same neighborhood for 20, 30 years, you knew those older neighbors. And that experience, I think, has faded in a lot of ways. So part of why I think you really have to work at an intergenerational experience. It's hard to just happen. I know that they're trying to do these co-housings where they're trying to have different variations of having young people with families live in the same building or community with older people. And it's really just kind of mimicking or replacing what neighborhoods used to look like.
Yeah, there's a big effort going on here in Oak Park for the co-housing. That's happening. It's happening around the country, as you say.
I just came back from a trip in which there were 10 people, age range 35 to 83. And I was 83. And then a few older people thrown in who were family members of the leader of this group. And it was very interesting to see who was solicitous, who was collegial, who was how people responded to me, and of course how I responded to all the younger people, which I adored, because I think intergenerational relationships are really, really important and something that we have to push more and more. So that it's exactly right. The neighborhoods and the social experiences that we had when we were younger are not available to most families today.
I have had younger people in their 30s and 20s, say to me, I'm hesitant to talk to older people because I don't know what to say. They don't even see this older person as just a regular human being.
Right.
And so where did that all come from? Like, right, when did we start saying this person? I have a story and I'll try to make it short. I work at Dominican University. I had an office, and there was a daycare center that was was housed in the building that my office was at. And they would take the little kids, 3, 4, walking down the hallways. And I was always ecstatic to see them. Oh, hello. So a bunch of them came into my office and they were all standing there and we were chatting about what they were doing. And on my desk, I had a journal, a gerontology journal of an older woman from one of the countries. And one of the kids said to me, "Why do you have a witch on your book?" And I said, "That's not a witch." And they go, "Yeah, it is. Look at that's a witch." And I said, "Oh, no, no, that's a very wise older woman." And I said, "Don't you know about wrinkles?" And they go, "No." And I go, "Every wrinkle a person has is a story and tells you how wise they are. So we love wrinkles on people, right?" And they all went, "Oh." And the teachers out in the hallway went, "Oh, we like that. We like that a lot." So why aren't those the stories that kids are hearing?
Why not? Exactly.
Because that's where it starts, right? You're scared of someone with a bunch of wrinkles because they're a witch.
Right.
Hey, Julie, before we have to close, I want to go back to what you said earlier on about you when you were quite young, you needed to understand more about getting older. So now you're 71. What have you learned about getting older? And how is that helping you as you move into your next phases?
Well, I think there is two parts to that answer. The first is, and we all kind of know this, you really can't understand an experience till you've lived it. So I've met with people older my whole life, heard their stories, heard what they're going through. But until you're that 70, 71-year-old walking down the street or looking in the mirror, um, you don't totally get it. You think you get it. And I probably got a lot of it. I was much more prepared for being an older person than most people because I had read and heard, you better do those retirement funds, dang it. Don't put off not saving your money in a fund because you're going to need it. Pay off those bills. Don't pay interest on your credit cards. So being a frugal financial person is really a very wise way to do aging, because when you hit that retirement age, when you decide you're going to take Social Security or however, it is a lot, there's a lot less stress when you did it the right way, or at least the way you're supposed to do it. The other part of it is my body. I mean, I haven't done all the information that I could have done on being a healthier body, but you really learn that the things you think are not going to come get you in 30 or 40 years, they do. Luckily, I've never been a smoker. I don't drink. So those two things were easy. Food, a little more of a challenge for me. But I knew the price I would pay by making certain decisions. I knew what was important as you get older. And I think that came from studying about older people and seeing the way family dynamics have gone in for older people, how some of the traits we have can isolate ourselves, or people run away from us rather than come towards us. So I think that those are things that I found incredibly helpful about being a person who worked with and studied. I've had such amazing role models in how it's going to look to be older. And I never dreaded getting older. I never dreaded having gray hair. I never dreaded wrinkles, because to me, there were beautiful stories that went with all of that. So
That's going to support you, keep you going as you move into your 80s and your 90s.
well, the other part of life that I've realized is that tomorrow it may be all over. There's no guarantee that we're going to hit those. So the other part of aging is trying to live and appreciate every day I get. And every morning when I wake up, I go, yes, another day. I get to do another day on this planet that I love. So I think we need to plan for those years to come, but we don't want to miss the day that's happening.
That's absolutely beautiful message.
Love that.
And thank you so much, Julie. This has been really informative and inspiring. So thank you.
Thanks for asking me to share.
And listeners, we'd like to see more of you at our monthly online programs. Make your voice heard as together we change the conversation about women aging. Visit Aging Reimagined Circle at womenover70.com. And if you enjoyed this podcast, listen to Beverly Glazer's Aging with Purpose and Passion. Are you ready to ignite your next chapter? Aging with Purpose and Passion is the weekly podcast inspiring women over 50 to embrace bold life shifts and unlock their potential through captivating stories from trailblazing senior women. And visit Beverly at agingwithpurposeandpassion.com.